Hi, so week 5 of Human in the Loop, not exactly week 5 because I've been away for a week, but week 5 in terms of these recordings. This week I worked on solving the content strategy piece with embedded AI. So you go from posting, well, it's not entirely random, but to how to sequence things along story arcs rather than just pushing stuff out there and then retrospectively going, oh, that worked. So much more predictive. I also cracked the Markdown-to-Voice. I'll come on to that in a second. The content story arc, massive thing this week. It's about how every single piece of content that's pushed out there is categorized under what I call a content. It's even things like the social media posts. Absolutely everything that goes out has, for want of a better word, like a DNA attached to it. It'll allow us to more accurately, I believe, find out using AI, go, can we empirically prove that this content idea will resonate with our audience before we write it? So that's the outcome. One of the big things in there is this content DNA is not about using there is some structure to it, but structured relationships. It moves away from that and starts using AI to identify the relationships and keep things organized. I'll share more of that as we start putting it into production, which is going to be next. The other thing I built, doing so much work, so much screen work, there are times when I've done a lot of research, put a lot of things together. What I wanted was just a way for it to be sent to me as a voice file, someone reading it out to me. Just, it's a very personal thing, just to avoid a bit of eye strain. So I built that, been struggling with it for a few weeks. And yes, there's a manual way of solving this problem, but I wanted to again prove with Human in the Loop that by using AI, you can solve it in a nicer way. And there'll be a mini learning where I'll show you how it actually works. It's quite neat. And solving that, there's a new perception that there's a new sort of power triumvirate. You've got smart LLMs, Claude, ChatGPT, those things. You've got no-code automation, and I'm going to bring in the word of vibe coding, but the way I really see the power of vibe coding. I'm not going to go into a discussion about vibe coding some SaaS platform. What I'm talking about is vibe coding, like very discrete microservices that perform a useful function to you, where in the past you would need to hire a developer and so on. And one of those functions, actually two of them now, is the text to speech, so that my research is read back to me while I'm going for a walk or so on. So I'm staring at a screen. And the other one is voice to text, so that my notes when I'm walking around the kitchen trying to figure out a problem can be more effectively pushed into AI. So those are all little microservices. Literally all I did was describe the problem, put it into ChatGPT and then into Claude and say, how do I write this function in Google Cloud? I still needed to know a little bit about Google Cloud, which I do because there was a few things that were wrong, but by and large it worked. And I think that is a much more, well, to me anyway, in terms of how we work with AI, much more interesting use case. So someone who's been programming for years can actually spin up a little tiny service that helps them in their work or how they intend to work. I think one of the other learnings as well is Google are making so many changes on Google Cloud. They're literally sticking AI in front of APIs that used to be there anyway. I wouldn't necessarily, unless you already know the platform, get some GPT to create a microservice on it, because it's mad as a box of frogs in terms of authentication and things like that. So yeah, I use it because I've got domain knowledge in it. But if you're starting from scratch, just use something else. I think Amazon would be a better choice if you're starting from scratch. So that's a bit of a learning. Some stuff that broke, the make MCP does need a refresh, but that's now just a habit thing. So before I start my day, I just refresh it and it works. So what's the big thing we're changing? Next week is going to be a lot around actually putting out into production some content which goes to the other side of what we're trying to solve here, which is, can we create what I call like a one-man media business here? So the first pieces of that content are going to start going out next week. We'll see how that works. And a big part of that has been the story arc. So I'm really trying to shift the approach to how I did launch sort of successful events, media businesses in the past, which is just to like push. And now we're trying to, a very big part of that. So the big insight this week is, which is a bit of a narrative thread to all of these retrospectives, is when you're surrounding yourself with AI tools, you really need to start thinking in AI native solutions, and especially if you would want them to help you. So the content DNA breakthrough came when I started asking, it's like, hey, how would AI solve this? Because as a human, when I look at it and I see a bunch of categories, I can make judgments and tag things properly. But AI doesn't work that way. If you just leave it as, oh, here is a list of stuff and tag it, it'll do a job, but it won't be right. So it needs context. And there's a separate video where I explain how that helped me. And it just needs a different way of thinking about it, because what I'm trying to do is offload to AI the jobs I don't want to be doing repeatedly all the time and win back time to do the interesting work, like, come up with the content DNA framework, like work out how to create content that is useful. So my view of useful content is, rather than going, hey, here's another AI platform, the better way of saying it, here's an AI platform. It could do this, this, and this, and that could change your business in this way, this way, this way. You investigate it rather than this feature and function thing. So that's the end of this week, and it's still very exciting. And lastly, my thanks to all the new subscribers. It's a big validation that there is some interest in me going through this journey and sharing the learnings, but also for you to take those in your businesses. So next week is going to see a real pivot towards more of that. Thank you for watching.